But here's what's fundamentally important about the iPhone and a lot of technological devices. I think the revolution that we're in right now, the change that is going on around us, is that when you buy an iPhone, the day that you get it, it's actually not very useful. It can make calls, it can do basic things, but then you start adding apps, and you start adding more apps and changing apps, and then the apps get updated, and you add some different apps, and you change things around, and your phone gets more and more and more useful as you go along. So the day that you bought the phone versus what you have in your hand today are two different things. That was never true before, because what happened was if you bought a Nokia or a BlackBerry, it came with the email or whatever functions it had, and after 3 years, you had the same functions, just less battery life. Today, you still have less battery life, and you have all these other, physical, mechanical problems. But what's changing is that the phone is more valuable after you've used it than before you use it. And
as compared to like a car.
Right, exactly. And this is where Tesla, I think, is unique, is when you buy a Tesla, it is really just a computer on wheels, right? They update and change the features. So the day that you buy the car versus 1 or 2 years later, they're not the same. It's actually a better car 2 years after you've bought it. And that's something that I think Silicon Valley gets because they've been there for a long time. It's also fits in with what I saw with software is the computer stayed the same, but the soft manual pieces on it allowed you to make more out of what was there. So it's like there's that change, I think, is happening more and more. And it's all the things consolidating down onto reusable chunks. So where we used to have all these different computer programs on our computer in order to use all these different things. Today, a lot of the stuff we do is actually just through a web browser. So we have one computer program and the rest of it can be changed and updated and fluid. I think that trend is seeping out more and more into more areas. I think Tesla's a bit unique because they're a bit advanced in doing this in the car space. But Tesla is not a car company. And I think if you think it's a car company and you compare it to other car companies, you'd come to the conclusion that Teslas are overpriced and not really worth it. But that's because you're misunderstanding what it is. It's not actually just a car. And it's the same as what the iPhone did with the phone. When the iPhone first came out and people put it up against the BlackBerries and so on, it was panned. I mean, people forget, but it was panned. People were like, no one will ever use this. Business will never use an iPhone.
Probably look like a toy by comparison.
Yeah, I need buttons in order to feel what I'm typing in, all these sorts of things. Like, people resist the change, of course, and they go, but what was critical about the iPhone, what made the iPhone was the apps, right? The user the being able to scroll and touch, that's great, but every other phone can do that as well. What really makes the iPhone powerful was their apps and their app store. Now, Android came along, but Android, iPhone makes pretty much all the profit in the mobile phone space. The Android came along, but the Android didn't really have the same coherence in the app store and all these. They misunderstood the apps. They thought that what mattered was the screens and the physical things was the focus. We can make it cheaper. We can have more memory. We can have removable memory. We can do all these physical features, but they misunderstood the store. In recent years, they've gotten much better, and they've turned around and realized that actually, that's great and all, but to really make this phone valuable, it's in that software, it's in the apps, it's in doing those things, and so they've caught up, no question. And this happened quite a while ago, but it's just an example. This, I think, is something that's going to happen more and more all around us. This, some people talk about the Internet of Things and all this sort of stuff. I think the trouble is that today we buy a washing machine, we buy a drying machine, we buy a dishwasher, we buy some lights, we buy all these things. And it used to be that they're all completely separate, completely different. And then there was this trend to start making them smart, so they would have these endpoints and talk. But then there's a couple of companies who got it, like Amazon, and realized that you tie everything down to Alexa, and then the Alexa will control your lights, your washing. You can start to. That's the current technological wave that I think is happening. Is that we are getting to a point where we're really realizing that it's not just about constantly making bigger, better hardware bits. We're going to keep making bigger, better cars or whatever it is. In reality, what's going to really matter is what can we then do to improve that internally. And I think that's, at least for the next 10, 15, 20 years, that's going to be a big trend that's going to start taking over a lot of the other areas and industries.
So where does your position fit in with that? So you were an entrepreneur at one point. I believe you work at a company now. So what's a little bit about your history after PhD?
Sure. So I'd kind of always been entrepreneurial. I'd set up several companies. Some were small, like consulting, and some were just me on my own when I was a teenager. And I'd always, like, once I discovered that you can actually make your own company and do stuff, then I did. Right. That was because I enjoyed doing what I wanted to do, and a company just was a structure that allowed you to continue to do that. And when I finished my PhD, together with a friend of mine, we founded this company. And the purpose of the company was to take what we saw as these clunky kind of hardware specialist pieces and do the same thing in software.
In the days before my dad died, you helped console me quite a bit, and you told me that I was in a lot of distress, and you told me that I have a human family that I can look to for help and support, and I really appreciated that. So thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for all the work you've done to make technology better, make the world better, and to talk about everything you've learned today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. I enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot, Alex.